Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, the HipHopLobbyist, and in today's video, we'll be going over some policies and some things that have happened since the election. Now, I get it. A lot of people are still upset in their feelings, trying to understand what happened, where Democrats went wrong, where the messaging didn't relate to working class Americans, how black men, the 20% of black men who may have voted with Donald Trump, how they've helped this all happen, and even how Latino men and women, or whoever it may be, white men and white women, whoever it really could be from a voting bloc, said, you know what, they wanted Donald Trump in office. And the main issue I've seen, why I've really helped, or at least started posting more on this channel, was the fact to say, you know, there are a community of people who really cared about the election, from entertainers to diehard voters, supporters on both sides of the aisle, and even non-party affiliated voters as well, or just people who are like, you know what, I want to know more, but I don't really know what to do, to be honest. And I think the biggest thing is, as someone who's worked in this process for 15 years, I haven't seen the commitment from people after the election being a part of the process legislatively for the issues that could impact their quality of life. Now, there's a lot of sensationalized news and a lot of sensationalized characters out there that help stir the pot for the media narrative, for black families, for racism, for immigration, for whatever it may be. And I'm not downplaying those issues. I'm not saying that they're not important, but I do feel that there's a greater need to help teach people, one, how to be more informed, and two, how to actually influence and change legislation in their state. So a part of this channel is building that out. And I know that over the past few weeks, we've actually grown from a small channel of maybe 10 to 20 subscribers to over, really, I want to say we're right at 150. And that's not a lot. It's not 1,000 yet. It's not 10,000 yet. That'll be a goal essentially, but I know there's a building blocks of getting there. And a part of that is saying thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, just go ahead and subscribe now. I am PhillipSingleton, HipHopLobbyist, and we're here to discuss post-election strategy. So a part of it, to me, on this page, we'll be building out at least some keywords and terminology you should know, from amendments to legislation, how to pass a bill, how to talk to Republicans, how to really understand what a lobbyist does and what they do, and even the day-to-day life of what I do as a lobbyist in this process. But a part of it is really helping educate you through this page. So all that put together, there's some states that are actually working to put their policies together to Trump-proof, some could say, their states. From an energy policy standpoint, homelessness, crime, whatever it could be, even immigration status. But I do think that there's a bigger conversation on these policies that's not really getting pushed by the media narrative on what can actually get things done. So what I'm going to do is start with California. Trump's agenda has states and advocacy groups girding for legal battles. Now, this is interesting. In my last recording, you would know that California did already say, hey, they're going to have a special session once everyone gets sworn in December 2nd to really reallocate funds for the Department of Justice. Now, California is a state where they're dealing with $68 billion of a budget shortfall, and they're going to have to prioritize that on top of crime, on top of other things that they've implemented. Even the new pedestrian law, daylight savings law, that says that you can't park within 20 feet of a curb in the state of California. And there are implications of that. You have areas like San Francisco that are eliminating 14,000 parking spots, and that's just one city. And if that's a major city there, I can only imagine what happens in San Diego, LA, even areas like Joshua Tree, to say, hey, now that we have to have this, implement this new law, what's the impact there? And I think a part of that is, as California prepares to fight Trump, there's also a narrative to say, okay, what's really a priority here? Because one of the amendments, I can't quote it, I should probably pull it up now, but even the progressive policies that have been pushed in California, a lot of the voters have said, hey, it's not just more Republicans moving here, it's the fact of some of the progressive policies that we put in place haven't really benefited us the way we thought they would. So we need to repeal some of those back. But a part of that is really Trump's attacking point to say, hey, California, what are you doing? Hey, New York, what are you doing? Hey, Illinois, what are you doing? But a greater part of that is actually understanding what these states plan on doing. So California lawmakers will convene, like I said, December 2nd for a special legislative session to bolster the state legal budget and defenses against expected onslaught of new policies from the Trump administration targeting reproductive rights, climate regulation, and immigrants. Now, there are some legal battles California is fighting regarding their electric vehicle decarbonization, their gas and oil goals. But then there is also the strain of how much it costs to live in LA or Bakersfield or any part of California in some aspects. So there's a point of saying, okay, for the cost of living it is in California, I know it's one of the largest states in the country. How does this really relate to what the mass majority of what we have in Congress, the Senate, the White House, and some state legislatures say, hey, you're not just going to push your ideals off on us, because when you have your electric vehicle mandate, how does that impact the corn producers in Iowa or Idaho who are transporting their goods into your state? How does that impact their quality of life and the way they do business? Because if the electric vehicles aren't sustainable to maintain the freight and the weight of the current semi trucks for what's currently in operation, what's the cost and who eats that burden? So there's a part of that will be in this fight, but that's not this specifically. These states are just trying to Trump proof their states, but Illinois jumped in the fight, New York and Washington. By the time this article, I believe there's more, but there's also the legal enforcement of immigration or immigrants that are bused from the southern border to places like New York, Martha's Vineyard, California, and of the sanctuary states, quote unquote, sanctuary states, where you end up having more of these progressive policies, these more liberal states, because a lot more urban communities end up being more Democratic in some aspect. So you have some Democratic mayors, some parts there, but it's also a fact of, okay, from a federal standpoint, if this is what we're doing, let's see how it impacts the taxpayers. Let's see if these states want 46,000 new immigrants like New York has had in their city. You drop 46,000 new immigrants from the southern border into Brooklyn or Manhattan or upstate New York, like Nyack, New York, or even Buffalo, then it gets to a point of saying, all right, cool, how can this all work in together, right? So either way, there's a part of saying, okay, these states are preparing. And when we're talking about communities, whether Black communities, minority communities, LGBT, whatever it may be, it's a fact of how do you now work and live within this new Trump era? And I know that there are a lot of videos from his YouTube channel that have been posted a year ago that are now circulating online and say, hey, this is what his plan is regarding DEI, white man reparations, whatever it is. We'll talk about that, maybe this video, another one. But I think it's more sensationalized to a point, because them just losing the Senate is another conversation. But let's focus on this other law in New York where a judge has actually kicked out a lawsuit from the indicted mayor of New York, Eric Adams, regarding migrants who have been bused from the Texas southern border to New York and New York City. Now, on last Thursday, the judge dismissed a lawsuit by Mayor Eric Adams in January from the charter bus companies that are contracted from Governor Greg Abbott. Now, everybody kind of knows this is a political play. There's no other way to really put it. Like, this is all political, but this is where it kind of breaks down into the law of what happens, because now you have taxpayer money funded and focused on issues like immigration, because, hey, we're dealing with the issue here. So we're going to say, hey, we're going to get you flights. We're going to get you hotels. You want to come to America. You want to be here. Let's send you to a place that says, you know what, you can be an American. You can like survive here, but you can't come to Texas. You can't come to these southern border states. You can go here. And because they'll accept you, you'll become their problem. And that burdensome cost for healthcare, for the maintenance really of those people, that's becomes a bigger issue, right? So even though the mayor's dealing with his indictment, he's also dealing with the fact of saying, hey, I have migrants here and I have other issues to deal with in my city as well. Because like I said earlier, at least 46,000 were sent to New York, 19,000 to Denver, 37,000 to Chicago. So Illinois is in that mix as well, and 17,000 to other cities across the country. So, and that's just from the Florida, that's just from the Texas governor. So when you think about the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, who sent some from Martha's Vineyard and other places, it really kind of changes the entire narrative of, okay, what's this immigration matter? What's the human rights matter here? What's legal? What are the legal ramifications, and who is financially or legally responsible if anything happens to these people, right? And that is a deeper discussion that a lot of the presidential candidates didn't want to have, from aspect of, okay, one, who's really footing the bill, two, where's it happening, and really how do we get here? Because now that we're in a liberal state like New York, and you have a judge here who says, hey, based on the Constitution, we're legally not going to do anything here. What's the next steps for your administration for another lawsuit? So the Adams administration said the lawsuit has had its desired effect. Fewer charter buses brought immigrants to the city after it was filed, and none have been identified since June. So maybe that was the call. Say, hey, we don't even want to win. We just want to file a lawsuit to say, hey, let's make this happen. But then if they're not going to New York, do you think they just stop busing the migrants all over? Like, we don't really know because they're not really reporting on it. And it's really on the fact on what they want to report on. But I know that as people travel, one thing, if they're going to Chicago, these 37,000, I'll know that their governor has signed a law to help not only protect the environment from a plastic standpoint, but say from a toiletry standpoint. If you don't have your necessary goods of soaps, shampoos, conditioners, whatever it may be that you need to really be cleansed on your travel, don't go to Illinois 2025, Project 2025, if you want to call it that, without any toiletries in your bag. And I guess it'll be tough for people who travel through TSA. You don't probably have any toiletries. You say, hey, you know what? I'm going to get these bare necessities at the hotel. Then you're going to show up to a hotel in Chicago, in Peoria, any other place in Illinois, and basically say, okay, cool. I got to go down to the lobby to get this because it's not in the hotel. Like, oh, you guys didn't fill my hotel room up with the condiments or the accessories I need to get this extra bar soap or whatever, and it'll be impact. Now, the other thing, the benefit could be maybe larger bottles because they have to be maybe smaller than 6 ounces. Maybe the hotels give 12-ounce bottles that, they charge more for the rooms. Like, hey, we're giving you this, take it with you because you paid for it because we had to give you larger bottles. But their biggest thing in Illinois was banning the plastics outright from the hotels. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed the bill in August. It takes effect July 1st next year. I thought it was January. My apologies, July 1st. But for hotels over 50 rooms, if you're less than 50 rooms, then you have until January 1st, 2026, or you'll be issued a $500 fine. Now, I completely get it. Again, it's an environmental issue. California, New York, and Washington, the same states that are fighting Donald Trump, have similar regulations. So when it gets down to a business standpoint, it's like, okay, cool, that's great and all, but there has to be a point of saying, you know what, if the federal government outlaws this or whatever it is, what if they override and supersede whatever it is, and we got to take the legal courses all the way to the Supreme Court? Is it really worth it? For environmentalists, yes. For the business folks, it's like, you know what, hey, if we can find a way to monetize it, they'll do it, because the hotel room rate can maybe go from $149 to $169 as a base if they have to include those shampoos and conditioners, right? That's not a tariff per se that people want to really throw out these days, but it's something that can really impact business to say, hey, which hotels aren't charging that additional inflationary fee for shampoo and toiletries. But nobody wants to have that conversation. It's more the sensationalization of saying, hey, one, we got to focus on Project 2025. Two, we have to focus on who Trump is appointing. And the third thing is we're away from all of the real things that can impact somebody's quality of life. And I completely get it. People need to be sensationalized. But I think the same sensation they're going to feel when they go in the hotel room and realize, hey, wait, what do you mean I have to pay for my own toiletries in this hotel? And that's crazy. But I think there's a bigger fight to happen here. I also feel that, and know, although the link's up, of more involvement in the educational space for what the Trump administration plans on doing, and also what is happening in other states. So let me pull this up. Had another recording and I realized that I can't have too many Google Chrome windows open. So there's a bigger fight happening now. Let me get the switch over. There we go. All right, there's a bigger fight happening now with religious freedom. that a lot of people aren't focused on, but I think it scales back to a lot of the political maneuverings and legal jargon and maneuverings around religious rights, First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and things of that nature. So because there's a lot of maneuvering and conversations around religious freedoms, legal rights, First Amendment rights, and a lot of things of that nature, there are a lot of court cases or legislation that's been pushed through to say, hey, we need to be able to have the 10 Commandments in our schools. We need to be able to have for God we trust, or in different biblical scriptures, whatever it may be, allow kids to pray before football games. And different states have really enacted different religious precedences legally. So what's now kind of being pushed is more the educational aspect of saying, okay, now we want to at least give private voucher money, or at least school taxpayer dollars to religious organizations too, because if we're allowed to pray in school, if we're allowed to pray before games, if we're allowed to have biblical scriptures on buildings, and also a fact of having other things that make even public institutions more religious based in some aspect, to at least have some religious inspiration from some standpoint, then there could be some legal precedent to say, all right, cool, we need to be able to fund some religious schools that kind of push the same method of saying, hey, we're going to use religion as an inspiration, or have our own religious ideology or our religious freedoms. And because of that, it's really created this underlying narrative of, okay, how do schools get funded? How do schools get funded with these various, I would say, public dollars? So in states like South Carolina, in states like Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, you will see various changes to the educational landscape, between educational savings accounts to vast school choice opportunities and options for all residents of the state. And then some states like Kentucky, they just said, hey, we don't want charter schools at all, and we're not going to change that, even though leadership in our state wants that. So what's happened here, as we can see, and a U.S. judge, an Obama-appointed judge, struck down Louisiana's 10 Commandments rule in the classroom. So this, to me, is almost a building block for what they're trying to do with the voucher roll. And if you pay attention to the end of the video, you'll see exactly how, and I think why it's more lucrative, or at least advantageous, to pay attention to some conversations around education, to say, if we're going to have that, I think there are two options here. One, how do we open our own Montessori schools or our own schools in the Black urban communities? And then two, for people who are very religious, leading the charge from banning books and teaching African American history in the church and things of that nature, and having their own schools, at least the infrastructure of what's happening politically in other places that we can actually help put in place in our own communities, just by paying attention and saying, hey, let's get some of the leaders together, LeBron James of the world, whatever it may be, to say, hey, if this is the landscape of what they're doing from a religious aspect, here's what we can do. From another business aspect, because business education is a business, here's what we can help create and construct at the same time. So let's get into this here. A federal judge Tuesday declared unconstitutional. Trump announces White House senior staff. We'll get to that in another video. Either way, a federal judge on Tuesday declared unconstitutional a Louisiana law requiring that the 10 Commandments be displayed in all public school classrooms in the state. A decision by the U.S. District Judge John, we're going to call him Judge John. Judge John said that the law was unconstitutional, discriminatory, and coercive, and is a temporary setback for the conservative groups trying to make expressions of faith more prominent in society. Now, like I was saying, it's the, what do you call them? The Moms of Liberty. There's the other organizations that are really saying, hey, we need to ban books. We need to put religion back in the school. We need to make this all happen. But a part of the making that happen is saying, all right, cool, we need to put the 10 Commandments in the school. We need to put in God we trust in the school. We need to put these other little factors in our schools to say, hey, here's how we make it all happen, right? So on top of after the election, a lot of people were still in their feelings, but when it came to education, a lot of people just kept the ball rolling. And Governor Stitt of Oklahoma was one of those members who essentially said, hey, we completely get the fact of we may have lost in some states like Kentucky regarding school choice, but here in Oklahoma, we want to really discuss the fact of, or at least have the U.S. Supreme Court discuss the fact of supporting religious freedom in school choice. Now, this ends up being one of the building blocks to say, hey, if I want my child to be in a Catholic school, to learn Catholic principles, that I can have the freedom to send them there, but not have to deal with the exorbitant cost of sending my child to that school. I can get some taxpayer relief, maybe an educational savings account that says, hey, I can get something to go here, but if not, I'll only be forced to send my kid to the public school or the public charter school, essentially, on where it is. And to me, there are different levels of the educational aspect. Yes, you have some private schools. If you can afford to do it, yes, educate your child private. The public school system, and the charter school system, the school choice. Now, for the religious schools being added into that mix, it ends up creating a whole nother narrative, because in reality, it's not just the separation of church and state. It's okay, if President Trump has the Senate, the Supreme Court, and these cases that are coming before them, if they have enough votes, which this is really all about, your vote to get the main votes, right, that matter. If they have enough votes, they could trickle back the religious freedom parts and actually say, you know what, this is exactly what it is. And it can really go either way to say, hey, the Supreme Court says yes, 4-7 vote, this is the law of the land. And the law of the land would then say, well, hey, the Supreme Court says that we can use public funds for private institutions, private religious institutions, private institutions in general. And that would say, okay, cool, to me, for the Black organizations, the Black pastors, and the Black educational leaders in this space, how can we start having these siloed conversations to say, okay, what are you doing in your community regarding this opportunity to educate our kids, right? Because it's more than just having 1 or 2 kids during an Easter program out of a congregation that can read. It's more of having an aspect of saying, okay, cool, how can we make sure that we're prepared for this opportunity so that if it happens in 2028, if it happens in 2030, that we're prepared for this opportunity to say, hey, yeah, we've seen this 6 years in the making. We're prepared to open our doors. But I think a major part of that conversation of people just focusing on the next midterm, on the next piece of whatever an election could be, to get that salvation, to get whatever they want from an election or an elected official, I feel that it misses the mark on what we really care and are passionate about. Because for the last 18 months to 24 months, we really cared about the aspect of book banning and the banning of AP African and the banning or defunding of AP African American history in our schools. And because of that, we've really kind of missed the mark on other policies that'll get there. And I think that another reason for starting the channel, what I've seen over my time, is people will have the passion before the election. They'll get there, and then nothing they want happens, right? And then these laws will be brought up to say, hey, we want to give funding, the public funding, to the private schools. We want to give vouchers to everyone who can afford it. Cool, we're going to have this conversation. But then we get into these conversations and we're only one issue focused. It could happen in the Black Lives Matter movement with police brutality. Okay, police brutality is an issue, but also homelessness is an issue. Also, infrastructure is an issue. Also, the ability to get funding or grants or whatever it may be is an issue in your community. So how do we invest in this issue? Because when you're dealing with your issue regarding Black Lives Matter, but you're not addressing Black women or Black people who have AIDS, or Black people who are struggling with some kind of sexually transmitted disease, that are a part of society that need treatment, and how can they not afford their treatment? That's a part of a Black Life Mattering as well. But a part of those conversations, whether it's religious freedom in the schools, or if it's a part of saying, hey, how do we take care of that mother on the bus, that person that's struggling to make ends meet day to day, that has 2 or 3 kids, who may or may not be in this category of people struggling. Maybe they're just on hard times right now, whatever it may be. How can we make sure that we're pushing some policies that's not just one issue focused, like a police brutality or a voucher-based system for religion or religious-based schools? So all that put together is why I'm starting the channel and why I'm really trying to build out a community of people to say, hey, I just don't want to talk about the issues. I want to learn how to do it in my state. And that's why I'm saying, hey, I don't want to talk about what a Black Men Summit could be. I want to talk about the statute and how we could amend this and how we can actually get there. But I also understand that there'll need to be another lingo to actually break down, okay, what is he saying by statute? What does he mean by amend? What do these different things actually rules or guidelines set for my day-to-day life and how I operate my business or how my family operates? Because it could be a simple thing as running a stop sign or running through or texting while driving or playing your music too loud or playing your music too loud or anything that could really impact the simple things that you really feel. That's like, you know what, hey, this wasn't a problem 2 years ago. Well, 2 years ago, it wasn't a problem until they changed the law. And when they change the law, now you're sitting here with a $25 or $50 ticket that you forgot about. And then now you have a $250 letter from the state saying, hey, your license is suspended because you broke the law. Well, I didn't know. Well, we told you. And a part of it is, I get it. You have your day-to-day life to go through and get what you need to get done. But I do feel that there's a greater conversation, a greater need to say, hey, for the things I really care about, the things I'm really passionate about, whether it's education, healthcare, quality of life, a Black job, that you need to be involved in those conversations that end up delivering those to your community. And also understanding that it can't just be one issue, because as I've learned through my time in the process, when a local government, whether it's the city, township, county, an association, a business, whatever, they have maybe 10, 15 priority issues, understanding that they're going to only walk away with 2 or 3. So if your main priority is sickle cell anemia funding, but you have an ability to get funding for your actual patients or people who are in this space to create jobs or whatever it may be in your silo, then at least having that on your list of priorities instead of just having maybe 1 or 2 things that you're only banking on because that's the only thing. I would say it like Steph Curry, LeBron James aren't just going to put up 1 or 2 shots a game. They're going to put up maybe 20 or 30 shots. So if we're looking at 20 or 30 shots that we need to list as a priority in our community, what are those 20 or 30 shots that we're looking at, right? What is it healthcare wise? What is it education wise? What is it infrastructure wise? What is it from a Black jobs perspective? And as they're shooting from a 2-pointer, 3-pointer, 3 free throws, like, okay, cool. I may not be able to win the Republicans over from this 3 from half court, from whatever it is, but I know that I can get this one shit from a free throw that's basically saying, hey, this is going to put 10,000 jobs in my community at $50,000 a year. This is going to impact so many people. I'm going to make sure I'm going to see this all the way through to make it happen. And we're not going to get into the brass tacks or the real tacks of saying, okay, cool, you're a Republican helping me. You're just more in a service position of where you're now elected and you want to see the same things in your community that you're talking about, but we're not giving a handout. We're giving a partnership to make something happen. And I think that's another thing to where you can't go in government with demands. At least having 30 shots, you're having a plethora of opportunities to look at and say, hey, this is what I want. But I understand politically this isn't your position, but environmentally, from a hunting aspect, because Black people aren't a monolith. People like to hunt. People like to have their own guns, from a Second Amendment right, from an open carry, from all these different things. How can we talk about these issues and these narratives and actually be educated to say, hey, you know what? No, we didn't get everything, but we shot 17 from 20 from the field for real. And 17 for 20 is not bad for LeBron James, Steph Curry, anybody. If Bronny shot 17 for 20 right now in the G League or whatever, y'all be sitting here saying, damn, he deserves to be in the NBA. Oh shit, I deserve to be a Republican now because, it's not hard to work with him. But I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that it does take a strategy to say, okay, how many shots am I going to put up this legislative session, and how many am I going to walk away with as wins? Because some of them are just going, hey, they're going to brick off, right? Tom Brady's not throwing 20 for 20. He's going to throw 17 for 20, maybe 12 for 20, maybe 10 for 20. But either way, it's about the win. Because if I can count that 10 for 20 or that 17 for 20, whatever number based on the amount of priorities you have as a win, then from that point, I can say, all right, cool. This is what we're doing in our community while they're fighting Project 2025, while we're fighting the Trump administration, while we're doing all these different things to say, hey, here's how we're getting more involved. And that being another building block in our communities to say, hey, we're not just preaching about the issue. Here's what we're going to get done. And that will transpire and the more people actually believe in the process. But until we get to a point of actually people understanding politics and people understanding exactly what moves the needle for people, we'll still be in the mix of it. But let's get back into it. Nice little soliloquy from you there. I appreciate you tapping in. If you haven't tapped in so far, please make sure you like the channel, subscribe, HipHopLobbyist on all platforms. And I'm not just a politician by trade. I'm a politician by trade. I'm a gamer. FIFA, Call of Duty, 2K. I haven't played 2K in a while, so NCAA. If you want it, it is what it is. Now, Call of Duty, I'm not going to get 20, 30 kills. I'm here for the laughs, bro. So we're going to record some good content, have a good time. But it's not just the politics. It's a little bit of fun. It's a little bit of everything. But again, let's get back into the content. I'll make sure I put all my tags in the description for everybody tapping in. So either way, again, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt filed an amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court in support of the Oklahoma statewide charter school board's decision to grant St. Isidore Catholic Institution status as a charter school. Now, Governor Stitt's brief agrees that denying St. Isidore school charter solely because of its religious affiliation violates the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. Now, this is part of that political strategy I was talking about. Part of that strategy to say, you know what, and you can read about this in Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law, a great book that really breaks down the different lawsuits that were filed regarding discriminatory practices in HUD, or the housing, urban development, or really urban housing, black housing throughout history. However, in this instance, you can kind of see the same play, because what they're looking at is, okay, you have a Supreme Court, you have a team of players that agree with who should be in the Hall of Fame of laws in this country, right? And a part of that is saying, okay, we're going to file this brief, and if we know that we have enough people on the Supreme Court, maybe Clarence Thomas resigns, maybe someone else resigns, and these two other people could be more pro school vouchers or public money going towards private schools or religious institutions. If there are two votes that can be there, they could be very decisive on the Supreme Court. So this issue is very impactful to me when I'm looking at it politically to say, okay, cool. If this is potentially the landscape in the next 2 to 4 years of potential lawsuits from Oklahoma, from Texas, from South Carolina, from Alabama, from Kentucky, from other places, potentially, that these lawsuits could really strip back different conversations about religious freedoms, one, and then also how religious monies or public monies are spent for education when it comes to religious schools. So because of those two aspects, stripping it all back, it would really open up the opportunity to say, okay, cool. Every school choice, every state can get an option of saying, hey, your money can go to religious schools. Now, in these rural communities, that's where you're going to have the biggest fight in the Republican caucus to say, hey, there's not enough access or enough investment in our communities to say, hey, we can open up 2 or 3 charter schools. We only have 4 schools in our whole community. And our grandmama, granddaddy, great granddaddy, everybody went to the same elementary, middle, high school in this area, and we never left. And a part of it is, if you bring another charter school in, all right, cool, but now it's competition to the public school, right? And that's been some of the fight there within the Republican Party to say, okay, how are we going to do that? So even if democratically, if you're like, hey, I don't want my religious schools, or I don't want more charter schools, I don't want a LeBron James school in my neighborhood, or Jalen Rose having a high school in my neighborhood, all right, cool. If that's the aspect or the position you want to take, then understand, okay, partner with the rural side and help develop those arguments to say, okay, from a bipartisan standpoint, let's make sure this doesn't happen. And I think that partnership, or at least saying, hey, they're not just Republican, they're not just racist, we can actually agree on the fact that we don't want public dollars going to religious schools. If that's a strong enough conversation, then okay, then that's a strong way to build a partnership there to say, okay, we have synergy here. We may not agree on immigration. We may not agree on who is actually teaching our schools and what kind of schools there are, but we both agree that religious schools shouldn't get any public dollars for our kids. So let's agree to disagree on everything else, but let's stick with this, because guess what? We'll combine together to kill these initiatives to force them to fund more public schools. But even when charter schools are part of that conversation in certain states that have that, in your state it could be, then it's more of a conversation of, okay, what other lawsuits are going to strip back other aspects of charter school or public religious rights, whatever it could be, to say, okay, what are the long-term impacts of this conversation? Because if they just take religious schools out of it and they just open up charter schools and say, you know what, hey, this is for rural charter schools, and here's what we're going to provide double the funding, and here's what we're going to do to open up there, and we're going to provide to make sure that it offsets any ease of the transitions and provide infrastructure for those old schools from 1920 and make sure that they're energy efficient, but in a new Republican way, then that's another conversation. But at the same time, that can make it more advantageous for them to say, you know what? Yeah, you can keep the religious schools, but yeah, let's have these charter schools, but you can keep the urban kids and urban everything there. I want to make sure my educational aspects from an agricultural standpoint or whatever is there. And to me, it's more, I'll be honest, it's like the IMG academies or even like Kanye school, like the Donda Academy, if you want to say name it that. It's like, to me, it almost gives that select opportunity to say, if you get the right venture capitalists or the right amount of funding in these areas and right opportunity, you can educate 200 or 300 kids at a time in your areas. And once you get a real bread and butter movement there, you can become the Kips of the world and say, hey, we have the LeBron and Jalen Rose Charter School Academy. But until it gets to that point, it's more of a, hey, how can we at least create something that's foundationally beneficial for our communities, right? So anyway, back to the content again. But this is what the Oklahoma governor has pushed through. Let's look at another one here. Texas. I did bring Texas into it. Can't bring Texas up and not talk about it. And you know what? One thing creatively, I hate the paywall, right? Because the paywall, you'll read an article and hey, you guys subscribe, $1 a month. I don't even know if Apple News is the best way to like go around that. But I do feel like the paywall thing is like, I get it, bro. We live in a world of content. Make more content, but you can't tell me all these millions of clicks, you're not getting no ad revenue from all these people on your website. But at the same time, people have for centuries paid 25 and 50 cents for it. I just feel that there's so many different ways to make the content and put the news out there that the paywall is just forcing me to go to Houston Public Media, a service of the University of Houston, to get the news. And luckily, they don't have a paywall, but if they do, I'm not coming back. I'll be real with you. Anyway, James Berrigan, we're supporting you for today. You know, if you have a little Giveify, you know, we'll drop a little 25 cents, 50 cents in for this article. Anyway, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick names private school vouchers as his top legislative priority. So this is another situation where you have another state, Texas, another major state, that is going to push this. And if they get a situation where their Supreme Court doesn't go with it, if they'll have some members there that don't align with their vision, even though there'll be some fights against this, then it'll be a point of saying, okay, let's kick it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because we know that Oklahoma is having one conversation with you regarding Catholic schools. Now we're going to do it for private schools in general. And that ends up being more the political strategy of saying, okay, when these Republican governors conferences and the Alex of the world and all these different political organizations get together to design political strategies, there's not that in the Black community to say, hey, this is what we need if they're changing that. And you'll have different associations, different groups that focus on their individual silos, which is great in itself. But collectively, there's not a conversation to say, okay, from a business standpoint, here's what we need. From a energy standpoint, here's what we need. From infrastructure, healthcare, those leaders saying, hey, not just needs from a Black summit conversation, needs like, okay, here's a legislative policy that we've actually written. And we know what ALEC and the Heritage Foundation and all these right-wing conservative groups are going to be pushing. Here's actually our legislative piece for Black communities, right? Here's something that works within this. Here's something that we don't want in any of this, right? And here's the benefits of what happens, and here's our game plan for that. And guess what? Let's go distribute this information to everyone out there in the communities to let them know exactly what's needed. But instead of that, what we get is placating news, placating the election, and just saying, hey, you know, next year we're going to get them in 2 to 4 years. And that's not effective to me, because the government is still implementing what it needs to. You have these states who are now saying, hey, private schools getting vouchers are a priority. Texas. So Houston, Dallas, Austin, any place in the state, right? When you're looking at that and you're like, you know what? Are the public schools failing our kids? Yes or no? All right, cool. Are these charter schools doing better? What about these private charters? Because if the private charters come in and they're actually able to educate our kids a little better, if we're actually able to, you know, have higher graduation rates, lower school to prison pipeline opportunities, so saying, hey, our third grade efficiency improved from 38% to 56% in some of these charter schools. That's generational changes right there. If these kids are literate by the 3rd or 4th grade, then we're good to go, because we can at least get them and retain them all the way through to a better point. But there are other races and other breakdowns who have lower reading breakdowns. Some people may say that the numbers are fudged, but for Black kids and Black folks in general, what I'm focused on is, okay, how do we strategically move within this map of, okay, if this is what could potentially happen in the state, if the lieutenant governor and the governors have said, hey, no, we've ran into roadblocks with our own state Republican dominated legislature. But at the same time, we're still going to try to push this forward, because guess what? We put in more people in here who are going to support us. And I know as a governor, I'm going to make that call. It's going to happen, because I've seen Ron DeSantis do it. I've seen other governors do it. And they wielded their power and they made it all happen. And that's what Donald Trump's doing. So I need to wield my power here to make it all happen. And hopefully, if you all don't say yes, or it comes real close, we can kick it up to the U.S. Supreme Court and say, hey, what do you think about this here? Because this is different from Kentucky. We're different from South Carolina. We're not just talking about these different things. We're talking about religious freedom. No. We're talking about private schools, because it makes a difference. So now, as a Black pastor, to me, it would be like, hey, what is your take on this conversation? Yes, we can talk Project 2025, the salvation that we may need, but no pastor, no politician, came to me this past Sunday to talk about anything political. All they did was end up coming and talk to me about something that was more an aspect of, hey, here's what I need from you to happen. That's why I'm here this Sunday. But until they show up again, and they probably won't for a while, it ends up saying, okay, cool, how can we take what we have from this conversation, take what we have from this election, and move forward? But, I've repeated myself a couple of times. Maybe through excerpts, people will hear it differently. But hopefully, they'll get to a point of actually passing it through. But again, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick on Friday declared private school voucher legislation his number one issue this legislative session beginning in January. So while you're setting your New Year's resolution, while you're getting ready to say, hey, this is Project 2025, this is the year of Trump, I can't believe Kamala Harris lost, I'm still in my feelings. I completely understand, but they're going to try to put another building block in place to say, hey, we want private school money to go, or we want public money to go to private schools. And because of that, you'll probably be distracted. You won't be paying attention. But hopefully, if you're subscribed to this channel, you'll be at least informed enough to say, hey, let's go at least give some kind of counter to what's happening here in Texas. Because honestly, while everybody's going to be planning their Black Friday shopping, their Christmas, whatever, the deals are going to be getting cut to say, okay, this is the first shell bill of what we need to be putting out. So everybody kind of garners their attention. Like, oh my God, they're about to do this, right? Then we need to understand it's going to get stripped back 2 or 3 different ways. We're going to have to cut some deals. How many Republicans are going to side with the Democrats to kill this? All right, cool. Here's the final product of what we need it to look like. Make sure we get at least half the meat on the bone, because this is a building block for what we need to sue, or at least take to the U.S. Supreme Court to make this law to land, just for our chess piece on moving this board. So that's really some of the conversation that's happening there. But let's get into another piece. And this is different. This is, I'll probably wrap it up here. But this is a little different election news. I found this kind of interesting. If it could load up. If it could load up. I'm not a singer. I've never been a singer for real. But I wanted to sing. You ever wanted to sing, but you can't sing? And it's like, damn, this is frustrating. But you still keep on. So when you get by yourself, you just get in the mic and talk real. That's my radio voice, actually. Let me get back to the news. Anyway, newly introduced legislation looks to get rid of ballot drop boxes and change Ohio election law. Senate Bill 325 would also require people to show their citizenship status when registering to vote and re-registering. And I get it, the citizenship piece. I don't think there's a state out there that allows non-citizens to vote. I know there's not a state out there that allows non-citizens to vote, but I think that there's a strong push to say, hey, We need to secure our elections, make sure that the people that are voting are U.S. citizens. They're going to continue to push this narrative, because if you don't allow this, it's a fight. Some people say it's discrimination. You're focusing on a particular group of people. It's going to focus, Black people, marginalized people, Muslims, whatever it may be, Arab communities, and the Hispanic communities say, hey, we got to show our ID more. But it's like, hey, we're going to round this into a package that says, these drop boxes that you wanted haven't been effective. And we'll get rid of the drop boxes, and we'll require this at the same time. So pick your poison on how you want to make this all happen, right? And that's really the legislative crux of how things happen. It's not really one particular bill. Sometimes you'll have a bill that'll have maybe 5 to 18 things in it, right? And those 5 to 18 things, those shots that we talked about earlier, those pieces of legislation will touch on so many different issues that it's like, you know what? You only focus on the drop boxes. Well, we need to phase them out by 2026. Cool. That's 180,000 people who will notify in the state that they can no longer use drop boxes. They need to be whatever. Like, we need to at least let them know 18 months before. They'll probably put some stipulation in there as they get rid of it. But they're going to round all these things into some other electoral package to push through. And that's just typically how it happens, right? So Senate Bill 325, I would assume that it'll be pushed through, most likely, depending on the rules. That may be the final product, the first product, or maybe it'll be tucked into another package that'll say, hey, here's how we're going to get rid of these drop boxes in the state, and here's how we're going to require IDs for non-citizens, or potentially catching any illegal immigrants out here, or illegal people voting in our elections. And it's a citizenship status thing. I get it, but I don't know a lot of non-citizens who are saying, hey, I want to openly, willingly break the law. I want to openly, willingly create an opportunity for me to get deported, get arrested, and embarrass my family and never come back to America again. Because if I get deported from America, I can't go to any other major country in the world. Can't go to Europe, can't go to England, can't go probably some African countries. You can't go to a lot of places because you got deported from the U.S. for doing something illegal. So I don't know how many of them would actually say, you know what, this is worth it. I would rather sit here and say, hey, vote for Trump, vote for Kamala. It is what it is. I'm not voting because I'm sitting here not doing anything illegal that's going to get me deported for what it is. But either way, I'm rambling. I appreciate you tapping into the page. Make sure you subscribe, share any videos or any segments that you may like and find amusing or entertaining or educational. More than anything, again, I just want to provide a platform for communities to grow and understand that we can do more than vote. We will do more than vote. We'll actually learn the political process as we go. But I'll be sharing some more tidbits, some news that I find interesting, and just some political strategy we can build around that as well as a community. But more than anything, I appreciate you tapping in. It's your boy, HipHopLobbyist. I'm out, man.